Welcome back to another English online session. I hope you all fine. Today, I am going to explain important chapter. The name of the chapter is Mother's Day. Mother's Day is actually a play. The play written by J.B. Priestley reveals how a mother's efforts are ignored by her family. It narrates how the family members who work 8 hours shifts a day look upon her, although she works for the whole day and all week. After all, she does everything for them they take for granted. They make her feel obligated to provide for them and do not even appreciate her efforts. It revolves around how her friend Mrs. Fitzgerald, who is a fortune teller, helps her earn the place and respect she deserves as the woman of the house. So, we all know that the role of a mother in a family, but most of the time it is ignored or not appreciated the way it deserved. So, through this play, J.B. Priestley trying to showcase or express that the role of a mother in a family. This play is written by J.B. Priestley. His complete name is John Boynton Priestley. He was born on 13th September 1894 and died 14 August 1984. Was an English novelist, playwright, screenwriter, broadcaster, and social commentator. His Yorkshire background is reflected in much of his fiction, notably in The Good Companions in 1929, which first brought him to wide public notice. Many of his plays are structured around a time slip, and he went on to develop a new theory of time with different dimensions that link past, present, and future. So, these are the details about the writer J.B. Priestley. The story begins with both Mrs. Pearson and Mrs. Fitzgerald sitting opposite each other at Mrs. Pearson's place. Mrs. Fitzgerald is a fortune teller and she has supposedly seen Mrs. Pearson's fortune, thus, she continues to say that she has told her all that is within her capacity to tell. The same reading can work in a positive way if Mrs. Pearson's actions are in a sign with it, and it could turn out to be bad too. Mrs. Pearson expresses her gratitude towards Mrs. Fitzgerald for having seen her fortune and shares how great it is to have someone like her around. She then asks her if she here, Mrs. Fitzgerald, has learned the art of fortune telling from the East. So the drama starts with a conversation between Mrs. Fitzgerald and Pearson. Mrs. Fitzgerald has the capacity to predict the future, like a foretelling, and she was just trying to predict the future of Mrs. Pearson, and Mrs. Pearson is very happy to have Mrs. Fitzgerald in her house, and she was wondering where she has acquired this skill. Is it from East? Mrs. Fitzgerald answers that she did learn the art from East for at least 12 years, while her father was climbing the ladder to becoming lieutenant quartermaster, and she was learning this. She then motivates Mrs. Pearson to stand for herself and get the respect she deserves at her home. Here, Mrs. Pearson replies to Mrs. Fitzgerald's advice by telling her it's far more difficult than it sounds. This is because she loves her family even if they ignore her needs. She loves to provide for them even if they are self centered. From here, we understood that the family of Mrs. Pearson, she has a daughter a son and her husband, they are self-centered. They are not at all giving importance to Mrs. Pearson's priorities, or all are self-centered, and they are taking care of their own matters, and she is being like a worker, a servant in the house. They are not trying to understand her feelings. She was working all the day, all the week, but even they are not giving the deserved respect or a kind of appreciation to her. That's the problem Mrs. Pearson facing, and Mrs. Fitzgerald asking her to just change herself and just do something to earn the respect she deserves. Mrs. Fitzgerald wants Mrs. Pearson to realize that it is not that difficult if she really tries. Moreover, she thinks it would add to their well-being as well if they behaved with love and respect with her. Mrs. Fitzgerald says that they need to learn to treat Mrs. Pearson certainly. She further adds that none of them, that means Mrs. Pearson's husband, daughter, and son, have turned out positively as a result of being spoiled by Mrs. Pearson. She enables her to see how running after them, handling their tantrums, doing all their tasks for them, and staying home while they enjoy every night is harmful for Mrs. Pearson as well as her family. So here Mrs. Fitzgerald is trying to make her understand it is her own behavior made to put her in this pathetic condition. She should deserve more respect, and all the other members are enjoying the weekends, and she is, as I said earlier, she was working as a servant in the family. So she was the reason, actually she was the reason. She endured everything, tolerated everything, and she is adjusting more than needed. That's why they couldn't, the family, the other members of the family couldn't see her pathetic condition, and they are thinking that she is not worried about anything. She is okay with that. She is happy with her present condition, even though they didn't appreciate her, even though they just wouldn't respect her. She is okay with that. Like the family developed a thought, it is because the attitude of Mrs. Pearson, she is not trying to get the respect she deserves. She explains how it should be the other way around. The family must treat wives and mothers with a full respect and be after them instead of throwing orders. Mrs. Fitzgerald blandly tells Mrs. Pearson not to act unknown as she is completely aware of the situation. Mrs. Pearson hesitantly says that she often tries to give her and the family the clues in between conversations. Mrs. Fitzgerald is trying to make her understand that it's high time, and Mrs. Pearson's family should respect her now, and that would require more than just clues. They need to be brought on track. So Mrs. Pearson is telling that in between, sometimes she used to give some clues that she needs respect, so she need more attention, and this is not the way she should be treated. But the family, the other members of the family, is not understanding. According to Mrs. Fitzgerald, it's very high time to make them understand. If they are not understanding by the clues, we should make them come back on the track. That means we should make them understand Mrs. Pearson need more respect and attention from the family side, her husband and her children. Mrs. Pearson understands what Mrs. Fitzgerald is trying to say, but she can't stand giving them any discomfort. She wants to clear it out with her family and take her stand, but she just doesn't know how to take the first step. Just as she is saying this, she notices that time for everyone to come back. Immediately, she gets worried about how nothing is ready for them to come home to, and they will probably have to rush out again. She tries to get up and make arrangements for her family. Mrs. Fitzgerald stops her from doing so very easily while lighting another cigarette. She asks Mrs. Pearson to begin at the very moment. She tells her to stop providing for them all the time and let them experience what it feels like to do things on their own. So it's time to complete the work because the other members of the family about to arrive the house. So Mrs. Pearson got tensed, but Mrs. Fitzgerald trying to convince her, just not do it again. Okay, don't allow them to do it again. Just let them do their own stuff and realize how hard it is, or realize the importance of Mrs. Pearson in the family. Even though in the hearts of hearts Mrs. Pearson knows that Mrs. Fitzgerald is right, she tells her that it is almost impossible for her to obey it. She feels that there is no point in giving a promise she won't be able to keep. She asks Mrs. Pearson to let her do the hard part and teach Mrs. Pearson's family a lesson. Mrs. Pearson tells her that she doesn't think it's a good idea. She says so because she knows that they might react to her changed behavior at first, but then would ignore it and resort to their old ways. Also, Mrs. Pearson doesn't blame them for this. She feels stuck because she knows it needs to be done, but it is unable to do it. Even though Mrs. Pearson is ready to do all these things, but in her heart, she is not okay with that because she loves them deeply. Mrs. Fitzgerald is trying to fix the problem, but Mrs. Pearson is not allowing and saying that that is not a good idea. She tells Mrs. Pearson that she has no idea how successful the idea can be. She thought that Mrs. Fitzgerald wanted to take her place in house and be strict with her family. She affirms that she meant the same, but she will not be taking her place as herself. She will become Mrs. Pearson and then do her part. As confused as she can be at the moment, Mrs. Pearson asks Mrs. Fitzgerald to be a bit more elaborate. She proposes that they switch their places, or in the other words, change bodies, wherein Mrs. Fitzgerald will look like Mrs. Pearson and vice versa. A bit more confused and now even surprised, Mrs. Pearson expresses that this is something not possible. Mrs. Fitzgerald questions her response by asking Mrs. Pearson if she has ever tried it. So here, Mrs. Fitzgerald trying to convince Mrs. Pearson that they can change, or change the soul and each other's, and Mrs. Fitzgerald can enter the body of Mrs. Pearson, and Mrs. Pearson's soul will go to Mrs. Fitzgerald, and Mrs. Pearson's body with Mrs. Fitzgerald's soul can control the family and teach them a lesson that Mrs. Pearson should not be treated in such a way. But Mrs. Pearson can't believe that. She is saying that it is not possible. And Mrs. Fitzgerald trying, how can you say that even if you haven't tried that? We already knew that Mrs. Fitzgerald knew certain tricks. She is a fortune teller. She has learned certain tricks from the East. So this is the brief introduction of this drama. a conversation between two characters. We have a lot to explain in this lesson. I will explain the balance part of the lesson in the next class or the upcoming classes. Now, just read the text. Don't forget to have the dictionary while reading to find the meaning of new words. See you in the next class. Bye.